Welcome to the English Matura with JB podcast. Today we're going to unpack a really fascinating story, one sent in by a listener. It's about the biblical figure Nehemiah.
That's right. And we've got some interesting material to look at. There's a study guide, lessons from Nehemiah, some commentary by David Guzik, specifically on chapter 6.
Right? And a background summary plus notes from a talk called Nehemiah Persistence Through Consistency. So, a good mix.
Definitely. And these all explore Nehemiah's life. I mean, this guy faced some huge challenges.
So, it showed incredible determination. That's the key thing, right? Persistence.
Exactly. And that's our mission for this deep dive to pull out the key lessons from these sources, focusing, you know, specifically on how he kept going when things got tough.
What can his story teach us about sticking with something difficult?
Yeah, drawing inspiration from his unwavering approach. And we want this to be really accessible for you, our listener, maybe especially if you're a high school student learning English. Clear language, but exploring some pretty deep ideas.
Okay, let's jump right in then. According to these sources, who was Nehemiah?
Well, the material tells us he was a Jewish exile, so living away from his homeland in Persia.
Okay,
And he had a really significant job in the Persian court. He was the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes.
Kabir, that sounds important, but what did it actually involve?
It was a position of huge trust. He tasted the king's wine before the king drank it, you know, to check for poison.
Wow. So, literally putting his life on the line every day, potentially.
Every single day. So high stakes, like you said, and far from home.
So, what triggers his big mission? What makes him want to go back?
He gets some really bad news from back home. People tell him Jerusalem, the city of his ancestors, is basically in ruins. The walls are destroyed. The gates are burned down.
And this hits him hard?
Oh, deeply. Sources say he wept, mourned, fasted. It really shook him.
So, what does he do? Does he just like pack his bags?
Not immediately. This is interesting. He spends 4 months just praying about it.
4 months before doing anything else?
Yeah, before even considering approaching the king. And think about it. Asking the Persian king, hey, can I leave my important job to go rebuild the walls of a city you guys conquered?
That sounds risky. Could have been seen as disloyal, right?
Absolutely. Maybe even treasonous. It could have cost him his life. He was definitely afraid. But he prayed and then he made the request.
The sheer audacity of his faith, not just asking to go, but asking the king to pay for the building materials, is incredible. No way. Did it work?
It did. The king agreed. The sources say God softened the king's heart, which is pretty incredible.
Okay, so he gets permission. He gets funding. He arrives in Jerusalem. Time to start building.
Well, not quite yet. When he gets there, he actually keeps quiet for 3 days. Doesn't tell anyone his real mission.
Really. Why the secrecy?
He waits. Then at night, with just a few trusted men, he goes out secretly to inspect the walls himself, to see the damage firsthand.
Ah, planning. Assessing the situation before diving in.
Exactly. You know, praying hard doesn't mean you don't need to prepare.
That makes sense. Like faith and practical steps go together.
Precisely. The people prayed and they set up a guard. Both were needed, prayer and action.
Okay, so he's done his homework. He's ready to announce the plan. Does everyone just cheer?
Well, that's when the trouble really starts. Almost immediately, opposition pops up.
Oh, who are we talking about?
Three main guys, Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite, and Geshem the Arab. And what's their reaction? As soon as they hear the work is starting, they begin with mockery. Just laughing, jeering, trying to make the builders feel stupid or weak. Trying to demoralize them from the start.
Yeah, but the work actually moves pretty quickly, which seems to worry them.
So they step it up. Yes, they do. The sources talk about them forming a conspiracy, actually plotting to physically fight against Jerusalem and disrupt the work.
Okay, so how does Nehemiah handle this first wave? The mocking, the threats of violence.
He confronts it, but his main focus is on the people doing the work. He reminds them of God's power and goodness.
It's kind of like a pep talk.
Sort of, yeah. He tells them directly, don't be afraid. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, encouraging them to persevere.
And did they just, like, keep building?
They kept building, but they also prepared. They set up that guard we mentioned, and get this. The workers started building with swords strapped to their sides.
Building with one hand, sword in the other?
Pretty much. It shows that mix, again, faith in God, but also being ready for the practical reality of the danger.
Now, the opposition wasn't just coming from these outside enemies, was it? I remember something about internal problems too.
That's a really crucial point the sources bring up, especially from Nehemiah chapter 5. Big internal challenges.
What kind of challenges?
Nehemiah finds out that some of the wealthier Jewish people were actually exploiting their own countrymen badly. Because times were tough, people were in debt, needed money for taxes, and these richer folks were charging heavy interest, forcing people to mortgage their land, their houses. Uh-oh. And even worse, some had to sell their own children into servitude just to survive within their own community.
Wow, that must have been devastating for Nehemiah to discover. He's trying to rebuild the city, and this is happening inside.
Exactly. And he gets angry. Right. Really angry. The sources call it righteous anger.
A what?
Righteous anger meaning like justified anger. So, anger not out of personal spite, but because of the injustice, the exploitation of the vulnerable. So he confronts the officials, the wealthy ones involved, and just tells them off. He demands they stop charging interest immediately and return the land, the houses, the people they'd taken, and he makes them swear a public oath to do it.
He really took charge, but the sources mention something else fascinating here about his own example.
Yes, this is key. Nehemiah didn't just tell others what to do, he led by example. As governor, he was entitled to a food allowance, money from the people.
Which he took?
Nope. For 12 years, he refused to take it. He and his own servants worked on the wall right alongside everyone else. Yeah, and he didn't use his power to grab land for himself. Plus, he regularly hosted large numbers of people for meals, paying for it all out of his own pocket.
Seriously? That's quite a statement.
It really is. And the sources use this to talk about integrity, how leaders, especially those representing God, need to live differently, how you handle money, how you treat people. Even small things, they argue, show your real character. It affects how people see you and your message.
Okay, let's circle back to those external enemies. Sanballat, Tobiah, Gesem. Mocking didn't work. Threats didn't work. What did they try next?
Right. The wall is almost finished at this point. Good, yeah. Just the gates, the doors need hanging. So it's a critical time. They realize direct attacks aren't stopping things.
So they switched tactics?
Exactly. They move towards deception, trying to trick Nehemiah.
How? What was the first move?
They sent messages asking him to come down and meet them, out on a thing called Ono, away from Jerusalem.
It's just a meeting. Sounds maybe reasonable, like let's talk,
On the surface, maybe a friendly chat. Perhaps take a break from the work.
but Nehemiah didn't buy it.
Number the sources stress his discernment here, like an insight into their real motives. He saw it wasn't a friendly invitation.
What did he think they were planning?
He figured they wanted to harm him, lure him away from the safety of the city and the work. Maybe kidnap him. Maybe kill him. Anything to stop the project.
So, How does he respond to these meeting requests?
He sends back the exact same message 4 separate times, which was dash. Basically, I'm doing a great work and I can't come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it to meet with you?
Hmm, just shuts it down. Focus.
Total focus. He refused to be distracted from the main thing. That's a huge lesson in persistence right there.
Okay, so 4 refusals. They must have been getting desperate. What was tactic number 3?
Well, the fifth message they sent was different. It was an open letter.
Open, meaning like public?
Yeah, unsealed so anyone can read it. And it's full of lies, slander,
What kind of lies?
really serious stuff. Accusing Nehemiah and the Jews of plotting rebellion against King Artaxerxes, claiming Nehemiah planned to make himself king, that he'd even hired prophets to announce it. That's basically accusing him of treason. Extremely dangerous.
Extremely. And the letter ended with a threat?
We're going to report all this to the king. Again, they suggest meeting to consult together. You know, implying they could make this problem go away if he just met them.
That is intense pressure. Public accusations of treason. How did Nehemiah handle that? Did he panic? Try to defend himself point by point?
No, the sources emphasized his calm. He didn't get dragged into arguing about the details of their lives.
So what did he say?
He just sent back a simple message. He knew he was innocent before the king, and more importantly, before God.
He didn't feel the need to prove it to them.
Seems not. He understood their real goal wasn't proving the accusations, it was something else. To make him afraid, to scare him, shake his confidence, make the people lose heart, and ultimately stop the work.
Right. Fear as a weapon. So when Nehemiah felt that fear or that potential weakening, what did he do?
He prayed instantly. The sources highlight this specific short prayer. Now, therefore, O God, strengthen my hands.
Interesting. Not strike down my enemies or prove my innocence, but strengthen my hands.
Yeah, strengthen me to keep doing the work. He turned the attack into a reason to seek God's power, to persevere. It's a powerful response.
Okay. Mocking failed. Threats failed. Deception failed. Slander failed. Surely they gave up then.
Not quite. They had one more trick up their sleeve, according to the sources, a really insidious one. What? They used false religion. They hired a guy named Shemaiah who pretended to be a prophet with a message from God for Nehemiah.
A fake prophet. Okay, what was the fake message?
Shemaiah tells Nehemiah, assassins are coming to kill you tonight. You need to hide. Let's meet inside the temple. Lock the doors. You'll be safe there.
Hmm. Sounds like spiritual advice, almost. Seek refuge in God's house. Laughs.
Exactly. Could even sound biblical in a way. But Nehemiah saw through it. Again, discernment was key.
How did he know it was a trap?
The sources point to his knowledge of God's actual law. He knew that as a layman, not a priest, he was absolutely forbidden from going into the holy part of the temple.
Ah, so doing what Shemaiah suggested would actually be disobeying God.
Yes, a serious sin, potentially punishable by death according to the law itself. It was a trap designed to make him sin out of fear.
Clever in a twisted way. Make him compromise his integrity through seeming piety.
Precisely. So Nehemiah refuses flat out. He says something like, should a guy like me run and hide? Who am I to go into the temple just to save my own skin? I will not go in.
Yeah, strong words. He recognized the setup.
He did. He realized Shemaiah was hired to make him afraid, make him act like a coward, make him sin, which would give his enemies genuine grounds to discredit him and spread evil reports.
And his response to Shemaiah was anger, accusation.
Accusation? No. Again, his first response was prayer. He basically said, My God, remember what Tobiah and Sambalat are doing here. He handed the situation, the enemies, the fake prophet, over to God.
It's just remarkable, looking at all these different tactics: mockery, violence, internal corruption, lies, slander, religious manipulation. He just didn't stop.
That really is the absolute core message coming through all these sources. Nehemiah's persistence is just incredible. He refused to be sidetracked, scared off, or tricked out of the mission God gave him.
And the talk we looked at linked this persistence to something else?
Yes, to his consistency. His consistent walk with God. The idea is that because he had this close, ongoing relationship when the crisis hit, when he needed wisdom or discernment or strength or courage,
God supplied it.
that's the idea. It wasn't just willpower, it was drawing on that consistent connection. They define persistence as that, you know, firm continuance in spite of difficulty. And consistency is achieving a level of performance, or faithfulness in this case. It does not vary greatly over time. Nehemiah showed both. He just kept showing up day after day doing the work, trusting God.
So, after all that opposition, all that persistence, what was the final result?
The result was, well, stunning. The sources report the wall was finished, completed.
Okay, great. But how long did it take?
Get this, 52 days.
52 days for a wall that had been in ruins for over 100 years.
52 days, an absolutely remarkable achievement, especially given everything they faced.
What did the enemies think, Sanballat and Tobiah?
When they heard it was done and they saw the completed wall, the sources say they were very disheartened. They lost their confidence.
Why? Just because they failed to stop it.
It was deeper than that. The text says they were disheartened because they realized that this work was wrought of our God.
Ah, they saw God's hand in it.
Exactly. It wasn't just human effort they were seeing, it was something more. And that's what got to them. The sources suggest that enemies might laugh at human striving, but they take notice when God is clearly involved. The success itself became a testimony.
Wow. Okay, so the wall is built. Is that the end of Nehemiah's story in the book?
Cool. Not quite. The sources also cover some later events. Nehemiah actually went back to serve the king in Persia for a time. For Islam. For a while, yes. Yeah. But then he returned, and when he came back, he found some, troubling things had crept back in. Like what? Problems had resurfaced. People were intermarrying with folks from surrounding nations in ways that compromised their unique faith commitment. Some of the kids couldn't even speak Hebrew anymore.
So the culture was weakening?
Yeah, the religious identity and culture were getting diluted. And you won't believe this. Tobiah, the enemy, had been given a room inside the complex.
The guy who tried to stop the wall living in the temple?
Yeah, in a chamber meant for storing the holy offerings. Plus, the Levites, the temple workers weren't being supported, so the temple services were neglected, and people were ignoring the Sabbath rules again, doing business on the day of rest.
Man, after all that effort to rebuild, how did Nehemiah react this time? Still persistent?
Oh, yeah. He got, and the text uses this phrase, very, very angry. Again, that righteous anger.
Because God's house was being dishonored, the agreements were being broken.
Exactly. Anger against the injustice, the disrespect for sacred things, the breaking of the covenant with God. It wasn't personal offense, it was zeal for God's honor.
And what did this anger lead him to do?
It led to immediate, decisive action. He personally threw Tobias's stuff out of the temple room and had it purified. He literally threw him out, furniture and all. Then he confronted the officials responsible, made sure the Levites got their provisions so the temple could function, shut down the markets on the Sabbath, and directly confronted the people involved in those forbidden marriages, apparently even physically grabbing some of them.
Wow, he didn't mess around. still fighting for standards.
Absolutely. The sources connect this kind of zeal to Jesus clearing the temple later on. It shows persistence isn't just about starting something, it's about maintaining it, upholding what's right even when it's unpopular or requires tough confrontation.
So, looking back at everything we've unpacked, it's crystal clear. Nehemiah faced all enemies outside, problems inside, spiritual apathy, direct attacks, but he just kept going.
Yeah, his story, as these sources lay it out, really hammers home that point. Overcoming big obstacles, finishing the job, it takes more than just a good plan or even prayer alone. It needs that consistent, unwavering persistence.
A persistence rooted in relying on God,
That's the connection they make. He didn't compromise, didn't back down, didn't get fooled. Even under immense pressure, he kept his integrity.
and his strength. This resilience came from that steady, consistent relationship with God.
Exactly. Knowing God's word gave him discernment. Trusting God gave him strength. That consistency fueled his persistence, allowing him to achieve something truly amazing.
So we've taken this deep dive into Nehemiah's story, focusing on his incredible persistence. We saw the planning, the prayer, the courage facing enemies, the integrity dealing with internal issues, and finally that wall rebuilt in just 52 days against all odds.
And we saw that his ability to persevere, to keep going, wasn't just about being tough. It flowed from that consistent connection to God, drawing strength and wisdom for each specific challenge he faced.
Which really brings it back to you, our listener. What challenges are you facing right now? Maybe it's a tough project at school. Maybe learning English feels like climbing a wall sometimes, or perhaps something personal.
Nehemiah's story is such a powerful example that persistence, when it's coupled with drawing on strength beyond ourselves, can lead to incredible results. Things you might even think are impossible.
So, what's the takeaway here? Difficulties are, well, they're part of life, aren't they? But like Nehemiah, deciding to be consistent in your efforts and persistent in leaning on your source of strength and wisdom, whatever that is for you, that can help you overcome things that seem insurmountable.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Where in your own life today could you use a dose of Nehemiah's kind of steady, consistent persistence? What wall are you trying to build or rebuild?
And as we come to the end of this episode, let's reflect on the powerful example of Nehemiah and the lesson of persistence. Remember the burning bush that Moses saw in the desert? It burned brightly without being consumed. In the same way, let your passion and determination burn within you without allowing challenges to extinguish it. Do not fear obstacles, instead, embrace them. For just as a great fire grows stronger when fed, so too can you rise above every challenge. Be relentless, be unstoppable, and let your inner fire shine as brightly as Nehemiah's unwavering spirit. Keep going, keep building, and keep believing. That's all for today. Thank you for listening. Take care.